We are thankful for your presence today. We have Dave and I think it's Julie Mobley, kind of from the Kelly family, and we're glad to have them with us today. We have others who are visiting with us today. Thank you for your presence. We do really appreciate those who've come, and the Apple Festival is a kind of an occasion for that, for folks to come. We have for you an apple out on the table in the foyer. Please take an apple. Away and see the tree on the wall down there. I don't see Doug Jarvis this morning, but he and Mike Alonso were working hard this past week to get us a tree on that wall there. Things are happening. You go on the other side of the wall and you see the giraffe. I mean the building, the house, I guess it is. We kidded each other, or they kidded each other about the giraffe going up. But things are happening, preparing for the upcoming Children's Church Children Worship. It's going to be beginning next Sunday, the 9th, and that's something that we are very, very thankful. I mean, and you see that, and you see those changes, and you see the painting going on the 2 rooms over in the annex, and you get a sense that somebody has a dream, a vision for this church, for our education program, and we really do appreciate that. That's very important for us as a church, as we see people stepping out and having a dream for this congregation. And we've got another kind of dream that's been put to us by Mike Walls. Mike has us thinking in terms of those things we try to hide in our life, those respectable sins of our lives. And in the growth groups, you'll be challenged to dream for your life, to be something beyond what you are today. And we're really thankful for Mike leading us in that growth group. And we'll pass on from this slide, if we can. All right, we lost the game. The Clemson. We got some Clemson guys in the background back there. We skipped around there with those slides. There we go. Someone has said, one's dreams keep you alive. We need dreams. And churches, too, need dreams to keep them alive as a body of people. I was walking through the foyer of a big theater, and I heard all these people speaking in Spanish, Argentines, but then I heard some people speaking in English. And I turned, and it was a group of people who had come in from New York City there in the lobby. And one of them said, I was expecting them to sing "To Reach the Unreachable Star." We were all in this big theater in downtown Buenos Aires. We had gone there. My mom and dad had come down to see their 28-year-old on his mission venture south of the border. And we had gone to this theater, known as the Columbus Theater in downtown Buenos Aires. It's on one city block, 7 levels up and 3 levels down below ground. It's an incredible theater. It is known as in the top 10 theaters of the world. We'd gone there with mom and dad, and we'd gone there to see a production by a ballet. It's by Cervantes. It was based off of Cervantes' work, The History of Don Quixote of La Mancha. And you perhaps have heard that story. The book itself is a conflict between realism and idealism in the lives of 2 individuals, Sancho and Don Quixote. Which do you tend to be, Sancho or Don Quixote? See, Don Quixote and Sancho's sidekick, they're going through the land, and they find this inn that's in disarray, in rubble. And so Don Quixote says, a mansion, a fortress, a castle. Sanchez looks at Don Quixote and says, wait a minute. And he picks up some rubble and just kind of, he can't believe what Don Quixote has just said, envisioning this to be a castle. Then there is this individual that comes along. Her name is Aldonza. Aldonza This woman is, she's a rough woman with rough ways. She's a loose lady. But Don Quixote sees in her Dulcinea. Dulcinea, that comes from dulce, that's sweet, the sweet one. Dulcinea. He sees her as his lady in waiting. And they sing songs together. Well, Sancho says in response to all that, now wait a minute. She is but a facade of tin with hair on her chest. And they laugh. They laugh at Don Quixote with his idealism. But Don Quixote challenges in all of us that cynic nature that we have. He has a dream for this world. He has a dream for this lady, Dulcinea. He believes this is a part of what it means to have a dream that'll keep us alive. For it is very much in the heart, embedded deep into the heart of God, this idea that we can become something beyond ourselves. It's seen in three characters, biblical characters this morning we'll look at. We'll look first at the character of Abraham. We've been looking at him in our daily Bible reading, our trek through Genesis. We looked at his life. Abraham, of him it is said. Well, we forgot to read the lyrics to the man from La Mancha, and this kind of captures that vision for the impossible. A man needs to dream, the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to run where the brave dare not go, to try when his arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. So much a part of that work of Cervantes. But as we're saying this morning, that idealism is embedded in the heart of God. It is from Hebrews that we read, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even when he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land. Like a stranger, it is by faith he does this, in a foreign country. He lived in tents as Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. And as you read through Genesis, you realize he gets the call in Ur. He goes from Ur on receiving the call in chapter 12, but then he goes up to Haran. He kind of hangs around Haran. God calls him a second time, and then he heads off. You can imagine the challenge this was for Sarah, having her own dwelling now to live in tents. Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob likewise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they're looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have the opportunity to return. And here we go. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. A wise father had a challenge for his sons. The one who would match the challenge would get the inheritance. There was a tall peak close by, and he says on the mountain range, he says, all right, I want you to climb to the highest point on that peak that you can go. The first one climbed the peak, and he came back with a flower that only grows in high elevations on that mountain. He sends a second son. Second son goes and comes back, and he comes back with a rock, and yet a higher elevation. He sends a third son who comes back with nothing in his hands. His brothers chide him. You never really went, did you? He says to his dad, Father, I did not bring anything, back except a vision. What I give you is something difficult to describe. What I saw from that point that I reached. From there, I could see in the far distance 2 rivers that flowed and eventually joined to form a gigantic river that runs to the ocean. I offer you something that I now carry in my heart, that now is a part of me, a vision that I saw far in the distance. Idealism that we find likewise in these patriarchs of Abraham. Abraham, who did not receive the things promised. They saw them and welcomed them from a distance. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one that God had promised them. What does God see in the distance? What is it that He wants you to become in your personal lives? We often limit ourselves to the perspective of what happened this past year and what's on the agenda for next week. But what is it that God would have us to see in the distance for our lives? I encourage you to keep a journal. I encourage you as a small group, growth group, keep a prayer list. And check off the prayers that you pray as a growth group to be answered, and see when they are answered and how God moves in our lives, the things He is doing. We as a church often think in terms, again, of just what happened the last couple of years. But what happened last year, just 1 year ago, our 60th anniversary, reminded us, didn't it? It reminded us of the trek, of the journey, of how God is working in this congregation. Our group that met in June of 1957, there on Oakland Street in the church's first permanent building. And then a second building. This is after 1990, the main auditorium built in 1980 and 1990, the annex. Many of VBS have happened and occurred, children's program, the education efforts of this congregation. And then our 60th anniversary last year, when we all gathered in front of the church building, and for this photo that Richard took of all of us there standing. What would God dream for the Hendersonville church that we might become? One's dreams keep you alive. A second person we will note as a biblical character that speaks to us about this struggle between idealism and realism in your life. Sancho and Don Quixote is the individual, are these individuals, a group of individuals known as the visionaries of the Bible. They are the prophets of old, the major and minor prophets that we can go to. The one I want to look at is Micah. Micah describes his world. We think our world is bad. It was worse in Micah's day. Micah lives in the times when Assyria was on the verge of taking all of the promised land. And he would watch as Samaria would succumb to Sennacherib and the Assyrians and the destruction of that city. That famine we talked about last week, that's the time in which Micah lived. He describes those times. He says, "Then listen, you leaders of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel, should you not know justice?" There's violence and lack of justice in our world today, more so in his day. "You hate good and love evil. You tear the skin from my people and the flesh from their bones. You eat my people's flesh, strip off their skin and break their bones in pieces. You chop them like meat for the pan, like flesh for the pot. Then they will cry out to the Lord, but He will not answer them. At that time He will hide His face from them because of the evil they had done." Whoa. Metaphorical, likely, although it was a very violent time. We live in violent times that disturb us today. And he says God's not going to answer. God's going to respond with punishment. And you go through the book of Micah and you see this. On one hand, there's judgment. On the other hand, there is this future, this vision, this idealism, this dream of the prophet Micah. He would say, in that day, declares the Lord, I will gather the lame. I will assemble the exiles and those I have brought to grief. There's a return. There is an exile. There's a captivity that's going to end. I will make the lame a remnant, those driven away a strong nation. The Lord will rule over them in Mount Zion from that day and forever. As for you, O watchtower of the flock, O stronghold of the daughter of Zion, the former dominion will be restored. A key word throughout the book of Micah, throughout the books of the prophets. A restoration is going to happen. Kingships will come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Micah dreams. He believes that God's people would rise from the ashes. And again, could be that something they had yet to become. Life never reaches higher than its ideals. Would you agree to that? It's that distance from where you are and where you want to be that keeps you going. Do you sense this in your life? And what we've said before, one's dreams keep you alive. We read these statements, and again the cynic comes out in us. Yeah, but we say to ourselves, why is it so difficult for us to have that dream, that idealism in our life? How about, as Micah described, the realities of his world? How about the realities of your personal life? 8 years ago, back in Louisiana, I was walking across our parking lot. We were right across from a state university. And I saw walking down a sidewalk a nice-looking couple and a small child, maybe 2 or 3 years old. And we're walking down the sidewalk. And you would think ideal, but what drew my attention to them was a ruckus. They were yelling at each other, walking down the sidewalk at the university. Fast forward 6 years ago. 2 years ago. In quiet Etowah, Carla Circle, where everybody kind of in our neighborhood walks around. And I was out on the porch early one morning, and kind of quiet, and nice to hear the birds. But what again caught my attention was this couple in their 60s walking. And the barbs, and the arguing, and the aggravated. I guess they thought nobody was up to hear them as they were walking down the street. You know, as newlyweds, we look at Jacob and his new wife, bride, and we can look back to that time in our lives, and you begin with all these expectations and these hopes, and it's for better or worse, and for richer or poor, in sickness and health, we think and we say to ourselves, and then reality hits, and we get to our boiling points as married couples, don't we? We just hope nobody's watching when we do. And in our economy, we have that dream job we thought was just going to be the answer for our lives. And then we get this unbearable boss who makes life miserable. One more day of her, I cannot stand it. As a teen, you say to yourself, why can't mom and dad understand? I need my space. Come on, I need my freedom. Why can't I do it my way? Dad, Mom? At every stage in life, we have this struggle of idealism in our lives and realism that fight on each other that we struggle with as individuals. You know, before we arrived in Argentina, we had a mission team, and we got together and we studied it all out as to how we were going to build a dynamic church in Argentina. And we were just, we were really biting at the bits. We get off the plane in Argentina, we barely can talk. And Argentina's not going to listen to you if you can't speak their language. And so they just kind of turn and walk away. Then it was learning a culture. We were misfits in this culture, so different from our own. And then we came from small towns and mid-sized towns in the south. And here we were in this city of 15 million people. Overwhelmed. And the reaction was, how can I possibly make a difference here among all these people? Well, that desperation passed. As 30 years have passed since that time. About 32 years, actually. And it's look in the face of this brother, Juan. We led him to Christ 26 years ago. And Juan is baptizing this late teen, young adult into Christ, a person he has studied with. Juan is an elder in God's church. Now, 26 years ago, he said, no, no way. Yet God had a dream for his life of something he had yet to become. See, God takes the long view on it. And we have to take that long view on our personal lives and on our church. Satan will come after us. You remember what you did just yesterday? And you think you can live differently? He'll come after us to make us think that we can't be something other than what we are right now. God would have us take the long view. Our third biblical character that we want to look at that helps us in all this struggle, idealism and realism, is Jesus. Jesus, the Savior. And his Sermon on the Mount, the paramount of all his teachings, you see this come out shine in Jesus. Blessed are you when you are persecuted. What? Blessed for being persecuted? Are you kidding, Jesus? It's Jesus who says, you are the light of the world. Oh, really? The salt of the earth. Me? How can I be anything like that? It is Jesus who says to us, don't abandon your marriages. Stick with your marriages. The Sermon on the Mount. If you possibly can. It's Jesus who says, make your yes, yes, and your no, no. And boy, does that ring in our political environment right now. I can't beat around the bush. I got to be definite on this. It's Jesus who says, somebody hit you on the cheek, turn him the other cheek. Now that flies in the face of realism in our world. You strike back. It is Jesus who says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. You got to be kidding, Jesus. Perfect? Those are his words to you and me. Be perfect. It follows in the context of a paragraph that says, love your enemies. This is to dream something very different than what we're used to become something we've yet to become. It is this statement, a religion that one can hold in his hand wouldn't be worth having. It is Jesus who inspires us to try again, who pushes us to our limits, who demands every ounce of our being, who says, be perfect. In educational realms, it's strive for excellence, right? You teachers? That's what we tell our students. It's the coach of Clemson saying yesterday, what's his name, that coach? Clemson?
Dabo.
What? Dabos, okay. Be your best, he says. Well, they were their best yesterday evening. It is Jesus saying, be perfect. And he would live this out in his interaction with others. He takes a motley crew of fishermen there on the Sea of Galilee, chooses them to be his apostles. Uneducated, uncultured, men with political aspirations, military aspirations, and he makes them their apostles. And while they still doubted, the scripture says in Mark 16, in Matthew, the 28th chapter, while they still doubted, he says to them, go into all the world. Go into all the world. Make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And I will be with you always. Could they possibly do that? They did it. Consider a dream for your life. One that may seem impossible if you or I are to think only in terms of next month or even next year. Consider for your life something, a dream that is impossible if you or I are to think only in terms of ourselves. What is that impossible, unreachable star He would have us to reach for? So in the end, Cervantes works Don Quixote. He's on his bed, he's dying, he's gasping for breath. Don Quixote is. It seems like the end. It's a bad moment. And in she walks. He looks at her, she looks at him. And they begin to sing again as they've sung before. And they're excited. And there's this joy in both of them. They sing and he dies. And she keeps on singing her song. And though they're standing there, hey, look. Aldonza, he's dead. Aldonza says, my name is Dulcinea. He had given her another name, a dream, an ideal for her life. It is what grace and mercy and the gospel is. His dream for you. Would you be baptized into Christ? Come as we sing.
Redeemed, how I love to proclaim.
Of the Lamb, redeemed, there is infinite mercy. Is traveling forever I am. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed. Is traveling forever I am. Redeemed and so happy in Jesus. No language my rapture can tell. I know that the light of His presence with me doth continually dwell. Redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed. Is child and forever I am.
Be seated, please.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to see you. And our visitors, you are always our most honored guests. And we want to meet you, greet you, see where you come from, talk about our apples in apple country, and there's an apple out there for you. don't forget to pick up an apple, and do come back at any opportunity that you have. The one thing I know about this place, I've lived here for over 50 years, is we have wonderful people. And the same about this congregation. I think sometimes we don't publicly say that, kind of announce how good we are, but this is a wonderful congregation of the God's people who do wonderful things. And just want to encourage you to continue to do that. Sometimes it's hard within family to get it all right, but we have a Christ that leads us right through and right to what we ought to be, what we can be, and what we are, a wonderful congregation of people. Thanks, Steve, for his sermon this morning. You get a brochure every week. Please take it apart. Look through it. There are an awful lot of things in there that you ought to be aware of. So do take some time, and I know you do, but start to take a little extra time, because there are a lot of things that are brewing. And it's going to be about children and young people. Just want to get you ready for that. It might seem like, what are we doing here? Well, even though sometimes we don't announce from the eldership exactly this is that and the other what we're going to be about in a given year, we are going to do a little bit of that this time around because of the topic of the day and the things that are going to be taking place in regards to children and young families. So strap it on. We're getting ready to run and run hard with young people and young families. Not that we're going to neglect our more seasoned folk. Growth groups, they start next week. There are materials that Mike is handing out to the group leaders. Be sure that you secure these and start to take down the lessons and take them apart and start to understand them well and get your groups ready and clean up your houses and all of that good stuff for the growth groups. Please do that. The Brevard Church of Christ will be hosting a Financial Peace University seminar at their building beginning next Sunday. For more information, there's information out on the kiosk. Remember that Wednesday nights, I don't know if you noticed last time, they're doing some work out here on the road, so you may have to adjust your coming in and your going out.
You come in from this side.
Come in this side. Okay, thank you. But there's some work going on out there that you need to be aware of. Next Sunday, a lot of changes in regards to our educational efforts. Promotion Day for our Bible classes for younger kids. Also, for the adults, there are going to be 2 classes going on. There will be one in the auditorium, Life and Letters of the Apostle Peter, and that will be taught by Sam and Jim Keevert. In the annex, there will be a program of study entitled Spiritual Gifts by Evan and Mike. And also, Steve will be doing Wednesday night the topic Joshua and Judges. So that will be your selections and your choices coming up for this particular teaching term. You always need to be about prayer, and I know we are, and would encourage you to continue to do that even more so for our body here and for people who are not doing so well. Prayer is powerful, prayer is good, prayer is necessary. And so pray for Mary. Mary was not doing too well this morning, so pray for her. Bill Sink and Brother Warren, Richard. Pray for him and the test that he'll be going through, and others that are listed in the bulletin. And if we don't know of a situation, there's some good avenues to get that information to us through Sister Yelton, and get that information to an elder. We want to pray for people. There's a service group meeting following the service that will be Colleen Rivers and Megan Schaefer. That group is asked to meet